people, Rochelle here. Ooh, it's been like a year, I know. Explain that real quick. So I feel like God had given me like 9 episodes. I did them. I was obedient with that. One of them being my testimonial, which is what I'm going to touch on today. And then I felt like I had some direction. However, I felt like I was disobedient in misusing some of it. I wasn't quite obedient with a thing he led me to do. So I removed myself from the platform because I think I need to keep myself accountable. Like, I need to at first admit, God, I'm sorry. I disobeyed you. I'm going to remove myself from this platform because if I'm not using it correctly, I need to not be on it. I feel like that season may be coming to an end, so I'm going to keep that in prayer. Boop, there. And then, anyway, I wanted to pop on, though, and say I did remove my testimonial from my page, but I wanted to do some explaining on why. So, before I did my testimonial, and before I went no contact with my family, which is kind of what I touched on it, anytime I got on social media and mentioned anything hard, didn't even have to be abuse related, but anything hard, I would get a lot of pushback, a lot of like hate, a lot of whoosh of like, I did a podcast online, not justifying lying, but understanding that maybe if you come from a home like where reality, like lying may be safer than your reality in a lot of ways. And I got a lot of pushback from that. I don't even mention abuse. I didn't even mention my family. And when I was praying about it, I felt like God said, do this testimonial and do it and let them know, like, you're going to put it all out there and it's not the end of the world. In fact, like, and this is just said, people are not the enemy. So all the people, like, yes, I've had to deal with anger. Side note, you can't really do forgiveness unless you've actually acknowledged that, like, you've been through something that requires forgiveness, which means you're gonna have to go through some steps, potentially like anger and frustration. So dealt with all that, but people are not the enemy. Satan is the enemy, right? We do not fight against flesh and blood. So I think darkness does not like being called out to the light on any level. But it's hard because it's like, as soon as you pull, like, even in myself, when I admit when I'm wrong, even though it's really hard, I can like come to the light, and then there's so much healing. And it's like, the enemy does not want you to have that freedom. So I felt like God was saying, you need to call this to light because people are just so afraid of it being out there. Then it needs to just be out there. So that's what I did. So I put it out there for a little bit. I did have one thing I said in it that I wish I hadn't, but I did like 15 takes. And it's really hard to do a whole bunch of takes of a hard testimonial and get it all right every single time. So I picked the best one, even though I had said something and it was like, oh, it's okay. But I felt released from God, like it served its purpose. I can take it down. So I'm taking it down. On a side note, I have my writing and stuff. I don't know if I'll be coming back to YouTube, but I do know that God's released me to keep writing. I released my first book, Imperfectly, because I do know, like, I wrote it, and it's like you stared at something for so long. I had it professionally edited. I had friends help me edit it. And it's like, then you go through it, and you're like, it could have still been better. But God knows the timing to release it. So as I've released it, I've had so much more support and just, like, miracle kind of things around this book. And this book deals with a girl dealing with her, she was an orphan and finds out she's like a queen in this different land, and but she's coming to the grips with her past and anger and frustration, and specifically with God and Jesus, and her having an encounter with him. So really, I wrote my book to bring you closer to God. That is my true hope, because we forget in this world how tangible and how real God is. He's so real. Even yesterday, I was like, I just need to put on, like, listen to some testimonials of miracles that people have, because sometimes I forget the ones in my own life, but, listening to other people, so it was like, no, I can remember the miracles in my own life and the prayers that he's constantly answering, and how tangible and how real God is. He's so cool. So anyway, popped on here. If you made it through all like 5 minutes of this, thank you. You're a joy. And you can, if you want to follow me more in depthly on Instagram at rhyetsy if you want to. There's probably some of you on here, as I had mentioned before, no contact with my family, so I do assume that there's people on here who don't like me, and it's okay. You don't have to like me, and you don't have to follow me. I release you from that. You're like, I don't need to be released. I know, I understand, but just putting it out there. Thank you for the people who have been so loving and supportive, and those who had messaged me saying thank you, that you did put my testimonial up. I was struggling with this. You're welcome. You're not a terrible person if you needed to do that, especially for your healing and stuff, because I'm going to be honest, I was a toxic person and I needed help, and I got the help I needed, and in order to stop being toxic, I needed to change who I was around and my behaviors, and that's a lot of work. And it's not always easy, and it's especially not easy when the toxic people are in your family, and that, again, it doesn't mean they're evil. Toxicity is a trait. It's like a habit that you've got to learn to, and this is my opinion. I am not a doctor. But in my experience of being toxic and not toxic, I would say it feels very much like a trait, and it feels like it really comes to light when you recognize it and go, oh goodness, I have some issues. I should work on them. And something about acknowledging your sin and confessing it with others and then getting prayer is so healing. And that was even about my testimonial, like feeling like I'm gonna confess it, put it out there. It's not the end of the world for anyone, because guess what? There's forgiveness for everyone. In order to forgive or acknowledge forgiveness, I do think you have to have an actually acknowledge that things happened. I do think you have to acknowledge it, potentially go through a process of being angry and frustrated, and then you can deal with it. I don't think you can just say, oh, I forgive him, but nothing ever happened. Well, then you didn't forgive him for what? You forgive him for what? And I would need forgiveness for sure. Like, I'm not perfect. I know that there's some things that it's like, growing up, I grew up in there were good times too, so let me just put that out there. Good times, but there were also a lot of bullying, a lot of belittling, a lot of putting you down. And in that culture, it's kind of like bully or be bullied. It's not really a fun place to be, So for sure, I have ownership to, which I do own, that I'm not perfect. I bullied too. Bullied and was bullied. And the nice, cool thing about God is there's forgiveness. And the nice, cool thing about being in the community of Christ, at least for the most part, at least in my community, is a safe place to acknowledge when I got it wrong and apologize and move on and keep doing better. And that's the goal. 8 minutes in. We'll see if this is the one I do.